Story 1. Get married. I've been with the same person for over 45 years. No other person could replace her.
22 years in, I call him my husband-shaped person. Yes, we have a ring, end-of-life trusts, a will, and so on. We never had kids, and we're both known by name in our industry, broadcasting, radio, and such, so no need to change names.
My parents are like this. They were together for a few years, had my sister and me, then broke up for a while. When my sister and I were adults, they got back together after my mom divorced her former stepdad. Sure, my parents could get married, but they're both in their 50s, and they're just happy together in life.
Chuckles lightly. That's either the strongest anti-marriage stance I've ever seen, or the most romantic one.
Story 2. I once went skydiving in a thunderstorm. Terrifying winds and rain made it unforgettable, but I'll never risk that again.
After over 50 years, we finally found you, D.B. Cooper.
Smirks. What's the matter, Hunt? Afraid of a little lightning?
Did you do that for recreational purposes? I had to jump from my job once, and the winds were much higher than was safe. I ended up in a drainage ditch 4 clicks away from where I was supposed to be, with a lot of weight on me. I fucked up my back, knee, and ankle. I enjoy jumping for recreational purposes. The difference is that it would be daytime in Arizona with perfect weather. I would never jump into weather on purpose ever again. It's extremely dangerous. Temperature, wind, and elevation can all change drastically in seconds. It's extremely dangerous to purposefully jump into a storm.
Story 3. Trying to fix a production database while half asleep at 3 a.m. One wrong command and you're living in a nightmare fueled by caffeine and regret. Never again.
Been there, bud. Never do that unless you're fixing something that's literally causing people to die or losing millions. It's not worth it.
It was 4:36 a.m. for me when I truncated the wrong table, and it cascaded. I was trying to figure out a weird bug that could not be replicated in either the development or staging environments. The thing that saved me was that I had run a full backup before starting. I restored the backup and migrated the missing data. It only took me 20 minutes to fix my mistake, but holy crap, was I ever awake afterwards. The best part, the bug never happened again. To this day, I have never figured out what the problem was or why truncating and rebuilding the missing data fixed the issue.
You need Adderall, Mellow Yellow, and Oreos. You need to earn the Carver title.
Story 4. Chuckles. I once decided to trust a cheap gas station burrito before a 4-hour car ride, and my soul literally left my body somewhere on the highway. Never ever will I make that dangerous gamble again.
Chuckles, for me, it was a full kilo of carrots in the middle of nowhere, Paraguay. Lessons were learned that day.
Chuckles reminds me of when my ex-wife decided to get a 7-Eleven hot dog after we hit the bar during a couple's weekend away. We did not make whoopee that night as we had planned. She instead insisted on projectile vomiting in our hotel room.
A guy who worked for us decided to eat ghost wings. We warned him. This happened at the Buffalo Wig Fest. Then we drove back to Detroit. He wasn't happy.
Story 5. Skydiving. I had zero fear back then. Now, oddly enough, I'm afraid to fly even in commercial planes.
I dove once back when your first go was solo and not tandem. Terrifying, jumping out of a plane. Then about 3 seconds of terror as you free fall. Then a huge wedgie when the chute opens. A few minutes of gentle floating. Then terror as the ground seems to race up toward you. Then a hard landing on a pile of rocks in a farmer's field. Then scrambling to gather up your parachute before the wind blows it and you across the field. Then walking 1 kilometer back to the airstrip. Yeah, once was enough.
I once went on a brewery tour in Wanaka, New Zealand. After tasting a few beers, we headed outside and saw a few people landing at the local airport. We had a slight buzz from the beer, which may have influenced our decision. 20 minutes later, we were in the air.
I'm afraid of heights. I skydived once and would do it again if the opportunity arises. It's strange how this stuff works differently for people. Chuckles.
Story 6. I'll never go on a boat excursion in Mexico, or anywhere for that matter, while being violently hungover. That was by far the worst hangover I've ever had. I was 22. I'm 32 now. I've never experienced a hangover anywhere near that bad. It was so bad. The employees on the boat called the medical staff to take a look at me. When I first woke up that morning, I assured my friends I was good to go on the boat because I felt great. I was still drunk, that's why I felt great. Chuckles, the alcohol wore off about 15 minutes into the 4-hour round trip, which included an island visit. The employees called the medical staff without me or my friends saying a word. I looked like I was dying, pale as a ghost and shaking like crazy.
Very relatable. Chuckles, at 23, I rode up through the mountains of Thailand in the back of a tuk-tuk while violently hungover. I hadn't drunk enough water because we hadn't bought enough in the convenience store and the tap water was a no-go. I hadn't eaten a thing. I genuinely thought I was going to die.
I was hungover in Cuba once and had to go on a boat at 6 a.m. It was also the absolute worst day of my life. Never felt anything like it. I fell asleep on the boat and got burnt to a crisp. So then I was hungover and had heat stroke. Felt like I was going to die.
I went marlin fishing with 4-foot waves a day after a bender. Worst 4 hours of my life. Caught a small mahi-mahi though, so it was worth it. First and only one I've caught.
Story 7. I survived a hemorrhagic stroke from a ruptured brain aneurysm. Please, if I have another, just let me die.
It got scarier after I survived it, as I got a $60,000 life flight bill in the mail.
If you're serious, have that shit in writing. Also, if your loved one is asking you to let them go, don't be an asshole. And if you're the dipshit nurse who told me, the doctor wants to try another half an hour before calling it, after I explicitly told you that my first husband didn't want to be resuscitated after 30 minutes, fuck you and fuck that doctor. Anyway, watching a loved one get CPR is not for the weak. I would 100% do it again and advocate louder if I know my loved one's wishes. What I wouldn't do again is wait in line for hodads in Ocean Beach. I like good food, but they weren't it, nor was their service.
I went through this about 12 years ago, but luckily, as I'm an Australian, the 13 weeks I spent in 2 different hospitals cost me $0.
Story 8. I was going 135 miles per hour in a posted 45 miles per hour zone. I was a foolish 19-year-old. I'm so lucky I didn't hurt or even kill somebody. Now, 20 years later, it still scares me.
Our son just got his license. I've shared with him my stupid decision to drive recklessly at 16. I'm also so thankful that nothing happened, but it haunts me 30 years later that I drove carelessly.
Man, this probably would have resulted in a felony reckless driving charge, probably some jail time and license revocation. Unless you're rich and can pay off the lawyers or judge.
I did some idiotic driving, going over 120 miles per hour the very first night I got my driver's license. At least it was out on some country roads, but wow. My friend in the passenger seat, and I could have easily died, as well as endangering others on the road. It makes me wince just thinking about it.
Story 9. Gave birth. One and done. That experience was more than enough for me one time, thanks.
My mom said if she could give birth, she could get her ears pierced. So after me, she started wearing earrings. Chuckles.
Story 10. I ran a marathon just to prove I could do it. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. Story 11. Driving. I had my learner's permit at 28 and I literally couldn't deal with the anxiety behind the wheel. At this point, I'm 100% okay with being a pedestrian and cyclist at 37. I got hit by a car when I was 23 and I've had post-traumatic stress disorder ever since. Sorry guys, I don't like cars.
Chuckles, me neither. I'm a 40-year-old female. And I also got hit by a car when I was 22 while riding my bike. Unfortunately, I never got my memory of the accident back. Otherwise, I'm afraid I might not be a cyclist anymore. I started riding my bike to school when I was 8 and never stopped. I understand why you can get your license when you're a teenager, though. At that age, you think you're invincible. The older you get, the more you realize what a huge responsibility it is. Add ADHD and anxiety, forget about it.
I love cars and driving, but let me tell you, I only lived 4 months in the second biggest city, right next to the capital, and loved that metro. Again, I love driving, but public transport that works is just something else. I leave work already relaxed since I won't be driving. I just sit down and wait 20 minutes or something.
It took me some years to get over my driving anxiety. I got hit by a car twice, and multiple people in my family have been hit by cars. So at this point, I'm more scared of being a pedestrian.
Story 12, skydiving. I really enjoyed it, but I'll never do it again because I'm too cheap, and B, I've had neck surgery now and I'm pretty sure the neurosurgeon would disapprove. For what it's worth, the neck surgery is unrelated to my one skydive 25 years ago. Story 13. Sounds like a no-brainer, but I would never again scuba dive with any instructor or environment I was not trained in or familiar with. When I was an extremely novice scuba diver, a friend of my uncle offered to take my brother and me to a shipwreck. He was an advanced military diver and made it sound like no big deal. Long story short, it was an incredibly dangerous dive that was far beyond our qualifications or abilities at the time. I was hit with profound nitrogen narcosis while inside the hull of a sunken ship, disoriented in the dust and debris, and my brother ran out of air. I'm thankful to this day that we both managed to ascend safely from 130 feet. It could have so easily resulted in either or both of us dying. In hindsight, I cannot believe the guy who took us would do something so irresponsible and bring amateurs who didn't know better, but we also should have done more research to protect ourselves. My brother and I are now far more experienced and have actually gone back to that wreck in a safe manner, but we don't ever push limits with our diving. Story 14, cocaine. I instantly realized why people sacrifice their families and careers for that drug. It was way too much fun. Never again. Story 15. I got so drunk that I don't remember some of the night. The next day, I had a nightmare hangover. I haven't done that since. This happened around 2009 or 2010. Story 16. Smoking cigarettes. I grew up in a smoking household, so I naturally bought a pack as soon as I turned 18. I took 2 hits and almost threw up. Chuckles, my stepdad was happy. He got what was essentially a full free pack for me, because I gave them to him immediately.
I had the same experience with soda. I used to drink my dad's half-full bottles. So he got me one for my birthday. I drank half, hated the way it made my teeth hurt, and quit. My dad is now battling diabetes because he couldn't kick his soda addiction.
Story 17. Living in a basement apartment with little light. If you're already prone to depression, this will definitely not help. Story 18. We walked down the streets in Kowloon, China. The spookiest, creepiest, scariest walk ever. We got to the point where we didn't see any English anymore and turned around. Story 19. Join the military. I've done it once for 4 years. Did 12 months in Afghanistan. Got out, though I would be 2.5 years from retirement if I stayed in. Story 20. Chopping wood with a hand axe without personal protective equipment. I am very, very lucky to still have my left hand. Story 21. Due to peer pressure, I jumped off a rock cliff into a lake. I lost my footing just before becoming airborne. I was certain as I fell that I was going to miss the water and hit the rocks. I was lucky and I know it. No more following others just to fit in. Story 22. Snus or nicotine patches. You'll get extremely dizzy from them, and the good effects don't balance that out. They're very bad for your heart.
Yeah, I did snooze once when I was at a date's place. I was incredibly nauseous and had to lie down on his bathroom floor for like 30 minutes. Chuckles, first and last time I ever touched that stuff.
Story 23. Cross-country road trip. I did it once. Glad to have had the experience, but definitely not something I'd want to do again. Story 24. Zip line at a company team building exercise. I let myself be talked into it. Did it once. Hated it. Story 25. Jumped off a cliff into Laurel Lake in London, Kentucky. Never again. It knocked the breath out of me and gave me one hell of a wedgie. Story 26. Gymnastics on the beach at 40 years old. Pretty drunk, so I felt fine at the time, but the next day was brutal. Story 27. One time, my family and I went camping, knowing there was a chance of a storm. The forecast said it wouldn't be bad, and there would only be a little bit of rain. While we were camping, the tornado sirens went off, and we had to hide in the campsite bathroom. After the storm, we got out, and one of our tents was submerged in a puddle of water. The other one got pulled out of the ground and carried away into a bush. We later learned that a tornado got somewhat close to our campsite, but it didn't hit us. We never go camping during a chance of storms ever again. Story 28. I went to Russia. Most people were rude and very unfriendly. No desire to go there again. Story 29. Times Square on New Year's Eve. Once in a lifetime thing to do, and once was more than enough.
Central Rome on New Year's Eve. Amazing experience. Never again.
Story 30. Chuckles trying to cut my own bangs during a mental breakdown at 2 a.m. I looked like a Lord of the Rings character for 3 months. Lesson learned. Leave it to the professionals. Story 31. The slingshot ride, the week after I did it, someone died on the ride. Tragic and terrifying enough that I'd never do it again. Story 32. Skinny dipping in the sea during a lightning storm. Incredible, beautiful, mighty, awe-inspiring, deafening and fucking terrifying. I will never forget it, and I will never ever do that again. Story 33. Chuckles, getting married, it's just betting someone else half of your belongings that they're gonna get tired of you first. Story 34. I went hunting in Alaska and had an encounter with a silverback grizzly. Not doing that again. Chuckles. Story 35. Going to watch Formula One at the circuit is surely the dream of any motorsport enthusiast like me. But getting up at 4 a.m. just to arrive soon enough for the 3-hour line in over 30 degrees Celsius, so you can get inside in time to watch the race, that's just too much for me. Also, don't forget the 2-hour traffic jam just to get to the parking, and another 2 hours to get out. Sunburns, overpriced drinks and food, endless walks. I'm glad I experienced Formula One live once in my life, for sure, but I won't do it again. Story 36. I ate a whole jar of caperberries because I was hungry, and that was all I had access to. Story 37. Get married. Never thought I'd find a woman I wanted to marry. Then I found one. Got married. Oops, people change. Got divorced. Never doing it again. Story 38. Took Datura. This was many years ago, back when I was much more adventurous with mind-altering substances. A friend, actually my girlfriend's brother at the time, told me he had collected some Jimson wheat seed pods and wanted to try them. So I went over to his house when everyone else was out of town, and we opened up a pod and each ate half the seeds. This was not a fun trip. Never fuck with this stuff. Story 39. In vitro fertilization. It was so traumatic. It wasn't even successful. Physically, it was hell for me. Mentally, it was more than hell. I paid so much money for the chance to have something people have for free. I suffered, even though I'm not even the one who's sick. The people closest to me made the stupidest fucking comments. Zero empathy. I've never had a fear of needles, but after injecting myself every day for 3 weeks, multiple times a day with huge needles, I legitimately developed a fear. That being said, I still want to be a mom, so I might end up just doing it again. Story 40. Go to a stadium to watch a professional baseball game. I dislike baseball, so spending hours at the park was just awful. Even in a beautiful stadium, it was far inferior to literally anything else. Story 41. In 2023, I flew out to see my dying grandma for 2 weeks. I decided to drive myself to the airport instead of having my husband drive me. Huge mistake, because when I came back, I owed the parking garage over $600. Story 42. Salvia. Mushrooms all day. But that shit is the devil's fucking herb. 10 out of 10, never again. Story 43. I've gotten high. I took a THC gummy, and when it kicked in, my heart started pounding out of my chest. I was curled up on the couch, panicking. I seriously thought I was going to die. Never again. Story 44. Deep sea fishing. Chuckles. I'm not really that much into fishing, and the outfitters do all the real fishing. Story 45. I think it's technically 3 times, but very close to each other time-wise. Smoke or generally nicotine. Overall, a very unenjoyable experience. Story 46. I had a threesome once. I don't think I will be doing that again. I've been happily married for 25 years. Story 47. Deep sea fishing. I hate to fish, I hate blood, I hate sitting around and drinking. I get bored easily. Epic trip for my 3 buddies. I wanted to jump overboard and drown. Story 48. Hot air balloon ride. I purposely didn't research the accidents that happen and just went with it. It was an amazing experience. Once I finished, I took a deep dive into it. Never again will I do it. Too risky. Story 49. I drank until I threw up and passed out. It only took one time for me to know alcohol will never be for me outside of special occasions. Story 50. Charter fishing. It's too early to get up, and I was with very enthusiastic people who loved being there. I was done after about an hour, honestly. Story 51. Climbing a Via Ferrata, the Iron Ladder, up a cliff face over 200 feet tall in Utah. Never again. Story 52. Take a bite out of a gas station corn dog before looking at it in the dark. Someone had already taken a bite. Story 53. I stayed up all night out at a bar or club and went to work without sleeping. I wanted to cry all day. I was so exhausted. Story 54. Get married. The horrible, no good days far outnumbered the awesome good days. I learned quickly that the old saying is that love and hate are separated by a thin line. My love and desire for my husband went away as quickly as the horrible, hurtful words flew out of his mouth. Sometimes the words hurt more than the fists and kicks that followed. Story 55. I gave birth. I love my kid, but my husband and I decided to take a few years to figure out if we wanted more. We decided we didn't. Our child is going to be 18 soon, and they made a joke the other day about us having another kid now. I'd be 64 by the time that hypothetical kid finishes high school. Chuckles, not happening. Story 56. One time, I was at my friend's house, and his mom brought home a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I ate all the skins off the chicken while they carried in the groceries. Then, the next day, I died.
I'm guessing you went home after and read comic books on the toilet? Chuckles.
Did you die on the toilet reading comic books?
Story 57. Opiates. I tried heroin once by accident, thought it was cocaine, and it just made me feel nauseous and overheated while I nodded off. I ended up giving myself Narcan to come down faster because I had plans to see a friend that day. Withdrawal was a pain in the ass. Story 58. Get married, for the opposite reason of the top poster. My husband is a cheating ass. Once divorced, I'm done. Story 59. While dieting, I bought sugar-free gummy bears. They were super low calorie, so I figured I could eat the whole large bag, no harm done. Oh, how wrong I was. Story 60. Unknowingly, I smoked cocaine. One of my friends put it in a pipe with some pot and told me it was just pot if I wanted to get high. Story 61. Quit smoking. Determined, I will never quit a second time because I'll never smoke again. I hope so. Story 62. I made all of my kids baby food at home. I can say unequivocally that feeding a baby papaya is something that I deeply regret. It's one of the few lessons in my life that I only needed to learn once. Story 63. Running through horse fields to save some time getting to friends' houses is not worth getting warning shots from. Story 64. I love this question. Here are a few did it once, never again moments people usually relate to. Texting a long emotional paragraph instead of just calling. Cutting your own bangs at 2 a.m. Mixing different types of alcohol like you are a scientist. Checking someone's phone just to be sure. Procrastinating until the absolute last minute and thinking, I work better under pressure. Story 65. I know I can't control when this happens, but I would like to stay in control of my mind and body during a dissociative episode. I lost so much time to one of these and ended up in another state because of it. It wasn't until I snapped out of it and came back to myself that I realized I had been taken advantage of by someone I thought was a friend, and put in a difficult situation that took me months to correct. Even now, my family and I are still healing from the damage that was done during that time. I would just like that to not happen again. Thanks. Story 66. Break my record in Pac-Man Online. 5 stages unbeaten. Story 67. I went to an S&M hooker. It was great, but I couldn't look at myself in the mirror the next day. Story 68. Hike the Inca Trail. I still love hiking, but I don't need treacherous mountains for a week straight to prove it. Story 69. At the time, I was a laborer and worked outdoors. The high temperature for the day was supposed to be around 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, me being the know-it-all 20-year-old that I thought it would be okay to wear a t-shirt to work that day. Yep, I'll never do that again. Chuckles. I froze my ass off all day long. I didn't have anything I could put on to get warm. I had to wait until the end of the day so I could finally get in my car and warm up. What a miserable day. Story 70. Jumping off the Olympic height platform. Worst wedgie ever. Plus, I'm much too old for that now. Way more risk than reward. Story 71. Visit America. I'm from Ireland and I worked in Silicon Valley for a while around 2014, but I feel like the whole society has been radicalized recently and that a civil war is inevitable. This is in addition to the usual problems with healthcare costs, university costs, guns, racial division, crime rates, worse work-life balance, food quality, etc. Story 72. Riding in a hot air balloon. The image was to gently and silently float over a pristine countryside. The reality was being crammed into a small box with a dozen other adults, just 3 feet away from a rocket engine blasting at what seemed like 200 decibels and 50,000 watts of heat, off and on every 10 seconds for an hour, while your son cries in a fetal position on the floor of the box due to the noise and heat, until you land in a Home Depot parking lot. Bonus fact. The pilot I rode with later had his balloon setup catch fire and kill all the passengers, but he survived. Story 73. I willingly went into water deeper than waist deep. If it weren't for 2 passersby, I might not be here. To Sophie and Ruby, if you read this, thank you. Story 74. Surfing. I went on a solo vacation to Vancouver Island. I took a private surfing class from an all-women's surfing school with 4 other women. Basically, the best introduction you could ask for. I hated it. It was exhausting, and the sensation of getting up on the surfboard for a few seconds was not worth the pain of having to swim and fight the waves and current for that many hours. To top it off, a wave flipped my surfboard up and it smacked into me. The small hard plastic fin on the bottom jabbed right into my thigh and groin area. I got a huge hematoma, internal bleeding in my uterus, and a torn hip flexor just from that damn plastic fin. Unbelievable. Thankfully, the internal bleeding was minor and stopped on its own. I had to do extensive physical therapy for the hip flexor, and it eventually did heal after quite a long time. It would take a lot of convincing to get me on a surfboard again. Story 75. Because I can't anymore. Getting my breasts removed. Because it sucked. I accidentally injected my migraine preventive medication straight into my quadriceps muscle instead of fat. Easily one of the worst things I've ever experienced.
Story 76. Ver esos videos gore que se hacían famosos en Facebook me jodieron la mente. Me daban asco y, por algún casual, eran tan populares que vi un montón. Unos por curiosidad y otros ya me salían hasta en la sopa. Disfruto la violencia, pero cuando es real me da asco. En una película hasta me da risa.
Story 77. Getting my urethra scoped in the urologist's office. He said I'd feel uncomfortable pressure. I felt a searing pain like someone injected Mr. Happy with molten lava. Never, never again. Story 78. 60-foot cliff dive. One and done. I had paragraphs of time to think before I hit the water. Story 79. I was with my partner, not married for years, and I found my husband. No cheating involved, but darn, am I happier. Story 80. Parasailing. I did it once in the Bahamas when I was young and foolish and didn't realize how dangerous it was. There were a few other tourists on my boat taking turns. The guy who went before me fell in the water with his parasail attached and got dragged quite a ways. Kinda scary to see right before I went up. Luckily, he didn't drown, and I didn't experience any problems myself, but once I got up there, I thought it was kind of boring, not much different than looking out an airplane window. Story 81. Dating apps. I know the apps are a great way to gain exposure to new people, but I don't think it's worth the headache. In my experience, people are just so flaky when they can hide behind an app. It's almost like since it's an app, it's okay to be rude and just not respond or ghost out of nowhere. Story 82. Uterine and cervical biopsies. Nope. I had 3 each 3 months apart, and I said nope. Never again. Story 83. Drink alcohol. I drank twice, both times when I was in Vegas. You don't need to drink to have fun. Story 84. Cocaine. I was at a house party and thought, okay, I'll try it. That's when the news report came on that Len Bias had passed away. Nope. Never again. Story 85. Meth. Story 86. I went to prison at 18. Served 9 years. 1 out of 10 would not recommend. Pros: free food, free housing, cheap tattoos, cheap healthcare. Cons: food sucks, full of criminals, that guy who wants to give you a honey bun, but wants your honey bun. Story 87. I sanded down and refinished all the hardwood floors in a 1,300 square foot house once. The floors in the house I was living in were horrible and needed something. I rented a belt sander, but I didn't rent the sander for the corners. I thought I could save some money by using my own handheld belt sander. I stained and sealed them with polyurethane. It's the most time-consuming process ever and super dusty. I spent so much time, but I really didn't know what I was doing, so they still didn't look that great when I was finished. Story 88. Whitewater rafting. Fun at the time, but the head cold from glacial runoff stuck with me for a while, and I just don't feel the need to try that again. Story 89. Well, once, one night, heroin. Apparently, opiates are a one-hit curse for life. I just don't like them. I don't even accept morphine in hospitals. Chuckles. Kind of a blessing, I suppose, but it does make for painful broken bones and post-surgery recovery. Also, I may have some sort of immunity to their temptation, but I was the only one that night who did. 2 years later, one of us died from it. I helped another get sober after some time, and the other 2 are somewhere at the bottom of the barrel, unable to reclaim themselves or their lives. Definitely not worth it, folks. Story 90. Went on a camel trek. Not too far. Maybe 2 hours. But it was uncomfortable as fuck. No stirrups like a horse saddle, so you can't occasionally stand. And quite the ride as the camel gets up and down. Story 91. Snort a shot glass full of 100 proof wild turkey. But if you ever want to feel every neuron in your body fire at the same time, I can recommend. Story 92. I ate raw fish sushi. I wanted to see what it was like, and I'm glad I did it, but it's not for me. I'm not a huge fish person to begin with. I think I'm going to stick to the barnyard for my meat from here on out. Story 93. I'm old and retired. Where do I start? Get married twice. Have 2 kids. Work for wages. Wake up when I don't want to. Never say no. Story 94. Salvia. I did not enjoy becoming a tuft of hair on some giant orange creature, one of millions of other sentient tufts of hair, and not being able to live my life or leave. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend. Never again. Story 95. I stapled my thumb on purpose. I was bored during history class. I'll never do it again. Story 96. Pregnancy. In and of itself, pregnancy was relatively easy, but the birth literally ripped me apart. Fucked my marriage. One and done. Story 97. Snorkeling. I was really excited to try it, but I wasn't mentally prepared for being able to hear myself breathing so heavily, and it freaked me the fuck out. I only lasted about 10 seconds. Story 98. Fishing on a charter boat for 9 hours. Dramamine in hand. It was an experience that I'm glad I did, but I prefer not to do again. If I do it again, it would be for a much shorter time period. 9 hours was too long. Story 99. I went to the Super Bowl. It was a nice bucket list item since you never know when the next time your team will make it in, but for the cost, I would have rather stayed home. I probably could have bought season tickets for the price of the whole trip. Story 100. Bungee jump. I passed out from fear on the way down, and when I came to, I was still bouncing from the momentum. Story 101. In theater, I was forced to play the main character when I specifically auditioned for the main supporting role. Story 102. Hard drugs. In the 70s, mushrooms, pot, mescaline. In the 80s, cocaine, great stuff, diet pills. Then the 90s began. Doctor shopping and pills galore. But not bad yet. In the 2000s, my world crashed. I crashed. Breathed deeply. I tried crack after I found out my dad was dying. He had maybe a year. Stage 4B lung cancer. Along with that nightmare, I became dependent on everything to stop the pain. God put me in jail. Got arrested for pot and violated probation. I had to turn myself in after my dad's funeral. They put my warrant in the drawer and allowed me to be home with my family. My father had just retired from being county administrator. His funeral was huge. Anyway, after going to jail for dumb stuff, I got addicted to heroin after I got cut off from all my pain pill doctors. I'm lucky I didn't go to prison. I forged like 8 of my doctor's scripts. It was all too much. Now,
Ismukapot.
have a cocktail once a year. Don't take benzos or tranks or anything but my inhalers and antidepressant. Drugs. They all lead to destruction. But moderation is always key. I'm alive today and 60% of my good friends died from methadone and Xanax overdose. 16 friends in 1 year, 2010. It's been a long road. Rehabs are overrated except for an out-of-control intervention, so you don't harm yourself or someone else. But the only way to get off drugs or any addiction, the want to, you must want it more than anything. And changing one little thing a day will blow your mind how far you'll go. Story 103, meth. I just didn't like being fucked up for so long. I felt like shit for almost a week after. Story 104, sex in the morning right after you wake up. Some people swear by it, but the mix of body odor and bad breath makes me reject even the best blowjob. No matter how sexy you want to be, I'll still point to the shower. We might go together though. Story 105, heroin. I had a snort of a little line at the pizza shop in a closed-down mall with the guy who lived in the stairwell. It was the best night of my life. Story 106. I got so scared when I had to get my COVID vaccination. I screamed and screamed, the whole hospital down. Then I got grounded for being scared, so I'll never do that again. Seriously though, how would you feel if you were a blind child just about to get stabbed with a needle? And then having your parents say you're a joke for being scared? Story 107. I once drove a vehicle in a thunderstorm. After coming home, I got a mild fever and cough, and I couldn't wake up for a few days or eat properly. I will not do that again. Story 108. I never order food from any place I have never physically been into and visually inspected first. It looked beautiful from the outside, but when I walked in to pick up the food, I almost vomited when I saw that behind the counter it was a filthy, disgusting mess. Story 109. I ate a lot of heavy sauce the day before, and I pooped in my pants in class the next day because I was too shy to tell the teacher as a kid. That shadow has hung over me my whole life. Until now, I still blush when talking and refuse to get into any situations involving contact with people. Story 110. It was more like twice, but picking up and stacking square hay bales. They're quite heavy and also very dusty and dirty. This is often done in the summer when it's also hot and humid as fuck. Also, getting on a steep roof to repair blown-off shingles. Fuck that. Story 111. I paid $11,000 for my girlfriend's eye surgery, only to have her dump me the next day. I won't mention any names, but it sounds like Alexa Mercedes Cervantes. Story 112. Going through college, I really learned a lot and I did enjoy the course. But now in the workforce, I learn a lot as well, and somehow it's much more fun and much less stressful. Slight smile. Story 113. When I was 5, I decided to see how much force it would take to cut myself with a pocket knife. I never did that again. Story 114. I got into an investment, haha. My money was gone in an instant, and I didn't receive a single penny. Story 115. Grabbed a coconut in the forest and smashed it against a tree for the fun of it. It was expired. Very expired. Story 116. I own a dachshund. Ours is 12 years old and started struggling with incontinence about a year ago, which is something a lot of dachshund owners experience. I'm changing her diaper multiple times a day and using my carpet scrubber almost daily too. She's got cockroach energy, so I probably have another 4 years of this before she goes. You do what you have to do for your pets because they're family, but I can't imagine doing this again. Not for a dog who could possibly live long enough to spend half her life incontinent. Story 117. Half marathon. I run 5 kilometers a few times a week. Sometimes I push myself to 10 kilometers. I did a half marathon once. Nope, it's too much for my joints to handle. My knees were in excruciating pain by the end, and compensating for them put my hip joints into pain too. I finished it, but only so I could say I did it and so that I never have to do it again.